Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Courtney. It really is my pleasure to be here with you in Mission Hills. I've been doing this job as a district community forester for the last 12 years. I actually have 28 counties in north central and northeast Kansas. I was talking to the folks earlier that I was a dairy farmer's kid. I grew up south of Manhattan, and you just don't get out into the world all that much. And I've had the privilege of working in a lot of towns, and I want to stay right up front that Mission Hills is very progressive. You have a beautiful city. Inventories are tedious, they take a long time, but what I like so much about them is it allows me to drive every street. It allowed me to walk through all your parks, your public spaces, and it really allowed me to feel your community as best as I can for not living here. So I'm certainly glad to be back tonight, and we're going to broadly cover management options for emerald ash borer. So write down your questions or remember them, and I sure will be glad to answer it at the end. I usually save these messages for the end, but I think when we're talking forest health threats. So I was a child born in the 60s, and that's about the time that Dutch elm disease began to really get off the ground. It was really raging through communities in the late 60s, the 70s. So that was maybe the first really big forest health threat that killed a lot of trees in cities. Okay, so then we've had pine wilt problems. There's this problem called thousand cankers disease of walnuts that are in states west of us and east of us, not been detected in Kansas yet. There's this bad little bug called the Asian longhorn beetle that is in the eastern part of the United States. So whatever the forest health threat, the commonalities with them all is the fact that humans spread them easily and rapidly just by moving firewood, by moving raw products. So one of our options could be if you're buying wood from states that are infested, and I'm going to show you a map, maybe buy locally sourced firewood. Now that maybe doesn't matter as much now that Missouri is under quarantine and several others are. But we not had emerald ash borer yet in this area, just not transporting. But we certainly don't want to take our firewood to Colorado on our camping trips or wherever we may recreate either. We don't want to spread the problem. So yeah, we have this problem. What I want to do is I want to be the bearer of what is it that we can do to help manage this problem. So we as people can just use our firewood locally, keep it here, don't transport it. The other big topic is the fact that species diversity is incredibly, incredibly important. The reason that Dutch elm disease was so devastating is that there were millions upon millions of American elms in communities. Well, when the American elms were lost, I'm going to let you guess what got planted a lot in its place.
Ash trees.
Ash trees. So you're going to understand, I think, when we get going, why species diversity is important. And so we're talking species diversity not just in our community, but I'm also talking our park systems, our street sides, our own yards. I live out in rural Morris County. I live out in the Flint Hills of Kansas, Bromefields, all of that is the Flint Hills of Kansas. But I guarantee you I have a lot of different trees. I'm not planting all the same trees in my yard either. So species diversity is incredibly important. And like Courtney talked about, an inventory is a very time-consuming process, but what we learned from the data, just by gathering what the species is of the tree, the size of the tree as far as the diameter, and the condition of the tree, that gives us so much management knowledge. And in this case, the city's been able to use that knowledge. And thankfully, we have a GIS specialist in my office. This was certainly not a skill set that I possess. She allowed me a chance to learn how to fix things in ArcGIS, and I finally just said, I don't use it enough, just do it for me. But Darcy was able to generate some really nice maps. So it gives us visual pictures, and I'm going to show you maps of the 4 most abundant species in Mission Hills. First of all, this is the little leaf linden. Now I apologize if you can't see, but we've got little red dots here that show where the lindens are. And by and large, we've got them scattered throughout the town. But I think this is High Drive. Okay, we have got a whole lot of little leaf lindens here. Well, thankfully, your city does invest in a regular pruning cycle. A lot of cities don't, folks. So in cities that don't regularly prune their trees from the time that they're young to the time that they're large, streets like this, little leaf linden naturally develops very poor branch attachments, very tight unions that aren't always strong when they're under ice loads or snow loads. And in this case, I'm not expecting, because your city invests in a pruning cycle, I'm not expecting this to be problematic from a storm standpoint. But in the world of species, we just need to be aware that this is one that can be broken up. So if you have species of trees in your yard and you're not regularly pruning them, pruning your tree can actually help a tree hold up to whatever our Midwest weather might give it. So that's a cultural practice that you can undertake in your yard to help just allow your trees to grow from a young age to an old age, but not necessarily for EAB management, folks. Understand, I have to weave in some cultural things here too, right? Okay, in my line of work. So pin oaks, your second most abundant. Little leaf linden is your fourth most abundant species. Pin oak is your second most abundant. And we don't know, oh, wrong way. We don't know of anything right now that's attacking oaks too bad other than oak wilt has been found in the metro area. But why I pay attention to your big your oaks is because they are very large in diameter. So even age diversity is important. Don't plant all the trees in your yard at the same time. Plant a few trees then, a few trees later. So in this case, from a management standpoint, in my narrative and the management recommendation was, you've got a resource that's very large. So we have some age considerations with this. Now I hope you can see the red and the yellow dots here. These are the sugar and the red maples. Your first most abundant is sugar maple. Your third most abundant is red maple. Asian longhorn beetle in the eastern part of the country. It's an insect that bores very large holes. Maples are the preferred, or a preferred species. There are a number of species that Asian longhorn beetle actually likes. But maples, so from a management standpoint, folks, and I'm leading up to something here, I want you to understand that while this is all very beautiful, that's the reason that when your city began to remove the ash as part of its plan, that monoculture plantings and heavy plantings along the streets, that's why your city is not going back with a monoculture planting of one species or two along your streets, because there are multiple things that could affect the public tree resource. So in this case, that's why Jesse and George and your staff have increased your species diversity in your city on public grounds, mind you, from 86 species to well over 90. Okay, so these are the reasons that your city is doing what they're doing, okay, in many ways. So what's at risk? If we don't diversify our landscapes at home, our public properties. This is emerald ash borer. This was a street that was loaded with ash, and a few years later, 3 years later, they were gone. So in my world, that's why we say species diversity is always important, because this is not what we want to see happen because of one little insect, one disease, or an environmental catastrophe. So back to emerald ash borer. It's a little green insect. Actually, so let's look here. So you all remember your science lessons that insects can have complete metamorphosis, where they go from an insect, or from, excuse me, folks. So we have an adult stage. We have eggs here, and I hope you can see them. Okay, then the eggs hatch. They go to a larval stage, and in the case of emerald ash borer, you have a first instar to a fourth instar. So you have a larva that the damage begins small, but as it grows and expands, the damage within the phloem and the tissues of the tree enlarge and becomes more significant as even the larva grows. Then we have a larva that goes from a pupa, and then back in the spring, the pupa changes to an adult. So we have complete metamorphosis with this. It's actually a pretty little green insect. It's only about 1/2 inch long. The adults begin to fly, and I'm talking generally here. There's a growing degree days. So the entomologist would say we need X amount of growing degree days for emerald ash borer to emerge. Roughly, the adults merge about the time that the black locust blooms, and it was pretty close this year. So I'm giving you this information so that you can be alert, so that you have information, so that you can survey your own landscapes and know what to look for if you would happen to have ash trees. Okay? So there again we have an adult. When we talk about borers, and I'm talking generally, but we have borers that are either round-headed borers or flat-headed borers. And in this case, the emerald ash borer is actually a flat-headed borer. So as it emerges from the tree to begin to go fly out and feed, that's why we have the exit holes that I'm going to show you here coming up. But I want you to see the ruler. The emerald ash borer is only about 1/2 inch long. It's only about 1/8 inch wide. Okay, as the head emerges, that's why your hole's about that big. Don't confuse it with all these other pretty green metallic insects, and people will. This all is going to be on your website, by the way. So I want you to know that the emerald ash borer is a green metallic insect that has purple segments under the wings. It is a good flyer, usually maybe about 1/2 mile at a fly, but there is some reports in the literature that it could go as much as 4 miles in a 24-hour period. But generally, it'll fly about 1/2 a mile. It's the larva that actually is so damaging to the tree because the larva feeds on the phloem and the outer sapwood. So I want you to see, can you see these S-shaped galleries? Now remember, there's a lot of native borers that are active. We've had drought. We've had stressful conditions for trees and shrubs and plants. So we're always glad to look at problems, and your staff. Have you all met George and Jesse, by the way? And if not, put your hands up, guys. These are your local folks, your local experts. So if you think you have EAB, these are the things that are going to be very specific that I'm showing you coming up. This is from logs at Wyandotte County. Okay, so I'm beginning to have my own pictures now that I can show. There are borers that kick the frass out, so their poo and their excrements. Some larvae leave it in the gallery, some kick it out. This is an insect that tends to pack its frass in the galleries. The larva is white, legless, and bell-shaped. I got a good picture here. Okay, there you go. So we have a larva now that has been found in the log. We've got draw knives. Your staff were all out there at Wyandotte County Lake one day with me peeling logs because we've all got to learn how to find this thing, right? And the problem with emerald ash borer is that it could very well be in an area 7 years before we can see the damage that it's causing. And that's what's been very problematic about this. For one, it's an invasive insect. It is not native to the United States. It actually is more native to Mongolia, China, the Far East. So back in 2002, when it was found in southeast Michigan, we didn't have any experience with it here. So this is an insect that for a long time everybody thought was only going to bother the native ash. Now here in Kansas, we're not going to have black ash. We'll rarely have blue ash, and in your communities you may not have it unless you plant it. But we certainly do have a lot of white ash and a lot of green ash in our Kansas communities. And remember the map that we had a lot of white ash here in Mission Hills. So we do know that the emerald ash borer is going to be problematic to the ash. Understand I say we very loosely. It was not me or my agency. There were reports from Ohio that actually EAB can conduct its life cycle in the white fringe tree. So there again, we're learning more about an insect that we didn't have any knowledge of until about 2002. So I want you to know white fringe tree is not native here in Kansas. So if you're going to find it, it's going to be because someone planted it. All right, so emerald ash borer, first found in southeast Michigan, 2002. Kansas joined the EAB infested club, and we were the 18th state back in 2012. We're now up to 25 states that have had detections. Louisiana is the most recent. Wyandotte, Johnson, and Leavenworth counties in Kansas from 2000 to 2014 are now under a quarantine restriction, federal quarantine as well as a state quarantine. They work together. They require the same things. So there really will be no stopping this problem. And that's hard to say because I'm always one of these, what can we do about the problem? Well, what we can do is we can be good managers of our landscapes, of our city's landscapes. And in Johnson County, I've got a commercial arborist friend this spring. He sent me the pictures you're seeing next, and he says, Kim, I'm finding it. I'm finding it easily, or a lot more easily. So look at the canopy that's pretty much is lost. So he's removing this tree. He sees the canopy loss. He's looking. He actually caught an insect. He caught the borer in this picture emerging. And by the time he was at a different tree, the borer had already left. He couldn't find any larvae as he peeled, but can you see these galleries? And this is a small tree, folks, 10 inches, 12 inches. EAB can affect trees that are even half an inch small. So this is an insect that does cause problems. So in your yard, in your community, you're going to look for the loss of the canopy. There may be these suckers on the tree. You've seen now the S-shaped galleries. We have an 1/8 inch size exit hole. I don't know if I've shown you that well enough. The bark with EAB may crack and come off. There we go. Here's a exit hole. This is your traditional size. D-shaped. It's a flat-headed borer, remember? So the hole it leaves is D-shaped, and it's only about an 1/8 inch in size. If you're seeing a 1/2 inch D-shaped exit hole, it's probably not EAB. Certainly get out something, measure it. If you really think that you've got something, please speak up. Speak up. And even the woodpeckers like the larvae. So you may see woodpecker damage. So the part of this program that I'm going to suspect you might have some interest in is how do you make decisions on your property of to treat or not to treat. Am I right about that? Okay. All right. So let's hit that real quick. When we started doing this training 5 years ago, the first criteria was, have we even found the insect? And when one tree at the Johnson County landfill was detected, at that time I wasn't going to sound the alarm and round up the troops and say you must treat. But now, folks, it is spreading in Johnson County. It is being found with more and more ease. So that's a given now. If you have a tree that is worthy of remaining in the landscape, now's the time to treat. So I think we have to be wise. Assess what the health of your tree is. And if you don't, contact a certified arborist or a knowledgeable arborist or George and Jesse here who are here for your service. Focus your treatment on healthy trees that are the most important, okay? It's hard for people to hear this, but not every ash tree deserves to be treated. And I'm going to show you some pictures that maybe explain that. How much of the canopy is missing? Does it have defects? What condition is it in? There are so many things that could interfere with the chemical being taken up. And are you going to invest from now in the next 20, 30 years on an insect if your tree really isn't in that great of condition? So you have a lot to consider. Am I going to tell you yes or no on something? No, that's not my business. But I hope I give you enough information that you can make decisions for yourself. Treatments should be preventative, and I think I'll illustrate that here pretty soon. I thought the Johnson County Extension website really summed it up well. I was there yesterday because I want you to understand that there's a lot of resources. I hope you grab the yellow sheet on the table because everything that I'm covering today I got from the sources on that sheet. I also want you to know where I get my information. So only high value trees in excellent condition should be considered for treatment. Good to excellent, I would fudge there. Do we have defects in the trees? If you stop treating your tree for emerald ash borer, it will become infested. And the treatment options we'll get into, I'll go through the ones that are yearly and the ones that you can treat every 2 years. Properly applied treatments are highly effective in controlling EAB, but I cannot say with good conscience that they're 100% effective. There's always going to be perhaps a circumstance or two that could prevent treatment from being as effective as you want it to be. So how can we decide trees that should be treated or not? First of all, you understand that trees should have buttress roots. We should see the roots on a deciduous tree. So if your tree looks like a telephone pole emerging from the ground, and oh, by the way, you have some dead wood in the top, and oh, by the way, you have some other problems, it may not be the best candidate. Now, these are not ash tree pictures I'm showing you, but I'm showing you defects that would make a tree, in my opinion, not worthy of treating. For instance, a shear crack in a tree. This is a high-risk situation. This is not a tree I would invest chemical treatment to, because in time it's going to have a problem and it's going to fall. All right, so cracks are bad news. Fungal growth. I have heard of people recommending treatment on trees with fungal growth on them. That is not professional, because this is a sign of advanced decay in the tree. And folks, when the tree fails, this is what advanced decay looks like. We might get chemical movement out here, but if your trunk of your tree is decaying and you're going to have a structural instability, is that a tree that's worthwhile of your investment? I would have to ask. And then cavities. Now this isn't exaggerated. This is a big cavity. But you have to look. Do I have cavities? Wildlife holes are a sign that that wood is dead, that there's a cavity there. Are those trees really worthy of treating? I would never, if this was ash, I would not invest treatment because of that really bad defect. And what if the canopy just looks sparse? The leaves are not emerging where they are. The tree just looks like it's struggling. This is not a tree, in my opinion, that is worthy of treatment. Thankfully, Kansas being the 18th state, we've had a chance to learn from other states, and I'm sorry to say that, but Michigan being the first, we've gained a lot of knowledge from what they have learned. And Dave Smiley, a researcher from Michigan State, he is recommending that a tree that has about 30% canopy loss very probably is not a good candidate for treatment. Now, folks, you understand that if you read different sources, you're going to get varying of information. I've seen anywhere from 25 to 50%, okay? But pretty generally, I'm hearing 30%. Do you see how much 30% is? There's not a lot of loss there. This is what 50% looks like. So this is why you need to be watchful of your trees. Most trees don't die overnight. Occasionally I get those calls. All of a sudden my tree has died overnight. Most of the time this won't sneak up and get you overnight. So monitor your landscape and look at what your trees, how they appear, what the things are in them. If we're talking chemicals, now I'm not going to get into the different formulations. There are product labels that are very informative. Back in my day of learning chemicals and becoming an applicator, we didn't have all this stuff online, but you have that available now. So if you want to research certain products, the information's certainly there. But let's talk about what are the different chemical categories. In my day, we called a chemical a contact chemical, meaning it had to spray and it had to touch the insect and be absorbed by the insect to kill it. Another term I've seen has been cover spray. Now we have a category of products that are called systemic. That means that the chemical is applied to the tree or the plant absorbs the chemical, and as the insect feeds, either on the leaves or in the phloem, like with emerald ash borer, then the insect is digesting the chemical as it feeds. So that is systemic. And within the realm of systemic treatment, the chemical can be applied through a soil injection, a soil drench, a trunk injection, a basal trunk spray, or a bark spray. So broadly speaking, that is how the chemical could be applied to control. There are 2 better publications that are from universities, okay? I try to follow the guidance of research, what's substantiated, and this is a really good one. And actually this is where I got my tables from, and I might as well go to it. There are a couple cautions here. In doing an inventory in your town, I know a lot of folks take care of their lawns. And a lot of folks, you have a really nice community. So I want you to be aware of something. If you're looking to apply imidacloprid yourself, so you have to go to the product label and you have to read what the active ingredient is. But imidacloprid is a chemical that is used in many of the products here. So let's get up here. There's imidacloprid here, imidacloprid here. Okay, where is it? I don't see it there. And then it's down here in a couple of these homeowner products. If you're already treating your lawn or treating your landscape with imidacloprid, understand there are use restrictions per acre. I just looked at it today. Imidacloprid, you can only apply 0.4 of a pound per acre to stay within the legal use. Now, if you're contracting out your chemical applications, your applicator better know that. But if you're looking at doing your own treatment, you need to be aware some products could affect the water supply, could affect things down below. That's why there are use limits. Dinotefuran, another chemical that's often used for the bark sprays, that also has restrictions. So if you don't know, if you're contracting out and someone's doing your yard spraying for you, ask them what are they using and what are they using it for. Become informed about what's going on in your yard. Because if they're applying, for example, 0.4 of a pound of imidacloprid in other functions in your yard, you need to switch to another product, okay, to stay within that. And that's all for them to be concerned about, but I just don't let someone roof my roof without understanding what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I'm just trying to be upfront with you with the information you need to know. Another publication on the yellow sheet that I thought was very informative was from Colorado State. And they've got tables as well. And they even give links to some of the products. Now you understand that there are restricted use chemicals that only a commercial applicator can apply. And then there are over-the-counter products that are available for homeowner use. That's the other kind of broad understanding here, is you can go buy some of these EAB products. But some of them you cannot. You will have to go through a commercial applicator. And in particular, the one that's being used probably the most is the 4% imidacloprid benzoate. Now I'm talking active ingredients. I don't try to keep trade names in my head, I just don't. But imidacloprid benzoate triage is the trade name. You can apply it every 2 years per the label guidance. All the other products have to be applied yearly. So this is where I'm going back to, you need to do a frank assessment of your ash trees, because you are looking at a yearly investment or an investment every 2 years for your chemicals. Okay, so what are the costs? And I know I've got to be past my time, so I'm going to zip here. Generally speaking, in this area, George and Jesse are hearing $15 per diameter inch. So if you have a 10-inch diameter tree, you're looking at about $150 to treat, roughly speaking. In Johnson County, my source is telling me that it is varying. But I want you to know that here locally, this is what your staff is hearing. Remember, reputable companies will not have time to come knocking on your door to sell you EAB treatments. Don't be pushed into making a decision now. My offer is only good for now. Don't be pushed into that. And I think you can learn a lot about who you're dealing with, because you can say, why do you think my tree has EAB? And why are you recommending what you are? And I think how well they can answer that is going to be a sign of how much they've engaged in this problem and how much they've learned and how well. And I think that's a way to discern someone. Now, in this area, you should not have trouble finding a Kansas certified arborist through the state association or a certified arborist with the International Society of Arboriculture, ISA. We've been talking about this for 5 or 6 years. Anybody that's certified in this area should know about EAB and what the options are. If anybody's going to apply chemical for you, you need to ask, and can they produce their verification that they're a commercial pesticide applicator through the Department of Agriculture. Those are the credentials that you can look for. And on a related note, I am about done here. Here's some of the things that I've seen on some websites. The first example, I really do like that good tree care is being promoted. And this is a quote. Someone says, pruning, watering, and mulching will minimize risk of your ash tree becoming infested. What I think they're trying really to get at here is most borers are not the cause of the initial problem. They're secondary invaders, and they usually become secondary invaders because the tree is under stress. So I like that they're encouraging good cultural care, but I want to caution you that you can water your trees and care for them all in the world as good as you can, but this insect is going to go into a healthy tree. It may be drawn to a stress tree. If you've got a healthy tree in your yard and a stress tree in your yard, it may go to your stress tree first, but your healthy tree is not immune to it. Okay, so that's why I have that up there. I want to make sure you understand that. There is no EAB disease prevention, folks. There is no disease as part of this problem. This is an insect problem, okay? This last part is technically correct. They say everything right, but I want you to understand that this is an insect that leaves a 1/8 inch D-shaped exit hole. Okay, now, if you're going to peel on your tree with a pocket knife, okay, is this an EAB? Insects could, their exit hole in the bark could appear D-shaped. You can carefully shave it and see if the hole stays true as you go through that. Or you may hire somebody to do that, right? But understand that there is a lot of insect activity, but these are the specific ways that you can tell. And I'll sum this up quick. Your community is beautiful. You have a lot of trees. We inventoried more than 3,900 trees back in 2013 when we did your inventory. Of course, the inventory data has changed because ash trees have been removed, but your species diversity has gone up. I know that because Jesse's been telling me what all has been planted. Your community benefits from your tree canopy. Your air quality is better because your trees are here, because they absorb the pollutants. When communities don't shed as much storm water, when there's less fast rushing water into your creeks and your streams, your water quality is better. There's less sedimentation flowing downstream, perhaps to a public drinking supply. Okay, so our community here is cooler because of your trees. So there's a lot of these social and economic and other benefits that your tree canopy does, which is why I'm so grateful your city, at the time that they're removing these trees, they're planting back trees as well. And I hope as you look at perhaps removing trees in your yard, that you also replant and care for your trees. Because for every dollar that's invested in urban and community forestry, if the tree can grow to a large and mature size, it will return almost $3 for every dollar invested. And this is a nationally known data. So you have a beautiful community. It just happens to have has a little problem that's a pretty green insect and it's invasive. But the sky is not falling. We don't have to think that we're Chicken Little and there are no options for us to deal with this. Yes, it's going to be a problem if you have one or more ash trees. But I hope with this information, we've given you at least resources. I hope you've grabbed all the handouts you need. You'll have the resource sheet. You'll have my presentation in time. I hope at the very least we've given you information that you're able to better make decisions on your own property.
My name's Courtney Christensen. I'm the city administrator, and I'm just going to go through kind of what we have been doing here in Mission Hills to deal with the emerald ash borer, our management plan for our city-owned trees. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about what the actions will be should we find that you have a tree that's infested on private property, and what action the city will take under those circumstances. So I wanted to go over that with you. I will tell you that, as Kim kind of referred to, Jennifer and I actually went to Wyandotte County Lake as part of the group of volunteers and learned how to strip trees. We actually own our own draw knives, and we can actually strip a tree from top to bottom and find emerald ash borer. I don't know how many city administrators and assistants can say that in Johnson County, but we do know how to do it. So we really have been following this very seriously for well over 2 years now, and trying to figure out what's going on and figuring out what's going on in the city. As I mentioned, that Kim had done the inventory for us through her federal grant, which did not cost us anything except for our payment to our arborist and our 2 interns. So that was very nice. That did come to us in a GIS system, which our new consulting arborist, Jesse, is very good at keeping current. So what happens is, just overall, and it also affects the emerald ash, is that as we remove a tree, it is being removed from our inventory. When we plant a new tree, it is being put back into our inventory. So our inventory is dynamic. It is not just good the day Kim left town. We are keeping it up to date so that we will always know what is going on with that. So we did an inventory. Initially, George did an inventory. George Ibe did for us, and we thought we had about 300 ash trees. By the time that Kim had finished the inventory of the city, we found that we had more like 360 ash trees on public property. Then what happened was that those are in a condition rating. They not only tell you where they are, but it tells you what condition they are in: poor, fair, good, excellent, like that. And then Jennifer and I personally drove all of the city streets, and I personally marked each of those trees based upon that inventory, and then making judgment calls also. Every tree that in that inventory that was an ash that was on city property that was in poor condition was removed in 2014. Most of the trees that were in fair condition were removed. When they were not removed because they were in fair condition, a judgment call was made. Possibly the only 2 street trees in front of that house were both ash. And so to lose both trees at once would be devastating to the environment and to that property. And so a judgment call was made on which one to go. It may be that we looked at them and said, okay, but if we took out both of them, we could plant a tree. If we only take out one, we can't plant a new tree, that there's not enough room. So then that was a conversation with the homeowner about, if we take out 2, we can go ahead and get the new tree in. So those kinds of things were considered. Things that were also considered were whether the ash trees were interrupting the natural growth of a privately owned tree. So it was damaging the privately owned tree's canopy, and in that case, then that was more likely to be one that was removed. We also removed all trees that were under, all ash trees that were under about a 4-inch caliper. So those newer, younger ash trees that had been planted that we should not have planted, that was our mistake. So we went ahead and removed those because that gave us a much greater opportunity to replant in those areas. And so we did take advantage of that. We did begin our diversification. We looked at the inventory and we said we have way too many sugar maples. We have too many maples. We have too many little leaf lindens. And so as we worked with people to replant, we have, a lot of people say, but I want a beautiful maple. We love the maples too, but the Asian longhorn beetle is on its way. And we do not want to have only maples or only things that they like here in our city. And so we have not done that. But we have planted, since we removed 164 ash trees in 2014, we have planted 380 new trees on city property. And so we have worked really hard. We go out, the 2 consulting arborists making a judgment on whether you have room on your front. We send you a letter. It comes from Jennifer, who suggests that we'd like to plant a new street tree on the city's property, but adjacent to yours. And what 3, or usually 1 tree particularly, but maybe 2 other choices of species that we would recommend. And then we work with the homeowner. I will tell you, that we are somewhat disappointed at the rate of people who tell us they don't want a new tree. That we find that there is a location and they do not want us to plant in the city right of way. And that is a disappointment that the council and the mayor have been talking about and how they'll handle that. Barbara Nelson is a councilperson who's here, and Mayor Baser are also here tonight, I think, to make sure I'm doing my job. And we will get to questions, but it is a disappointment that, you know, we would like people, when we have identified a space that a street tree would be good, we would like to be able to plant in those locations, because it is a very strong priority with the council and the mayor. I have worked here for 15 years. It has never not been a priority when I do my budget and my evaluation. It is always a priority to reforest and continue to grow the urban forest in Mission Hills. That this treed, canopied community is who we are and how we identify ourselves. And so we need to continue that process. They have in the budget that they will adopt, whichever version, on August 10th, it has 100 new trees for next year to be planted, if we can get people to allow us to plant those 100 trees. So we're working on that. So I just wanted you to know. We have selected, and it's a very small number, only 13 ash trees to be treated. It is very expensive for a city to have to treat multiple trees. And when you looked at that price, $15 a diameter inch is very expensive for us to have that, and know that to do it, you have to do it ongoing forever. So we have selected 13 trees that were in that good to excellent. Their location on the street, maybe on a corner, was very central to how that neighborhood identified itself. Those kinds of trees were selected for treatment. But the average tree that is out there, the average ash tree that's out there, we're just letting it go. All right, when the emerald ash borer gets to it, we will remove it, and we have a plan to do that. So our plan is that we are monitoring all of our ash every single year, and then we go and look at them, and so we're keeping track of that canopy loss and those kinds of things and identifying those. And we have identified 2 trees. Tell me it's not more. 2? Okay. Emerald ash borers that the city is on city property, that were street trees that have been removed. Did we remove them yet? They're on our list to remove. And it was like night and day in a year from what we saw a year ago. So it is here in Mission Hills. We were surrounded for a while. Fairway had it, Prairie Village had it, Kansas City, Missouri had it, but we didn't have it. We have it. It is here, and it has been here. This was not like it just came, it's just that that's when we saw it. So we know that we have emerald ash borer here, and so we will continue to work for that. So we have a budget for removing the trees as they come about. Poor, Michigan has had so many trees die so quickly that they have, one city alone that I talked to had over 8,000 dead ash trees on city property just standing there, which is a huge, liability, but they don't have the money to remove them. And so the council has put aside money for removal. And so we have money, and then we are budgeting money every single year. When she was talking about that when you spend $1, you get $2.70 back in value, we spend over $190,000 a year on our city street trees. On pruning them, we try to prune 1/3 of the city every single year. There are communities around us that prune maybe every 20 years. We try to prune 1/3 of the city every year. Now, how that benefits you is like in the ice storm of 2002, when a lot of trees were destroyed, and the federal government was talking about what they would reimburse. They said, we don't reimburse for tree removal or pruning. And I said, but in this little book, it says that you will return us to the condition we were in. And they said, well, but no city prunes their trees regularly. And I was able to give them proof that we prune every 3 years. And they paid us the 80% to reprune all of our trees and to remove any trees that we thought were going to be dead because of it. And we got 80% of that reimbursed because we have a regular plan that we've documented, that so we have an advantage. So that's one of the ways that your tax dollars is being spent and being kept track of. So what we would talk about next, so as we find them in our trees, city trees, your trees, sorry, you know, I feel a little possessive after 15 years, but as we find them on the city trees, we will be removing those trees because you cannot kill the emerald ash borer. There is not a spray, there is not anything that is going to kill the emerald ash borer. The only way to stop it is to grind up the tree, and so that's what we have to do. We have to remove those. So then the question becomes, and so you've heard, we're going to replace the trees. We're going to diversify, we're going to replace. But what happens when it's on your property? Okay? And it's coming. So that's why we wanted to do this. We didn't want it to be a shock to anyone when you get a letter from us telling you that we have concern about your tree, that we've sent out the consulting arborist, they have identified that they believe your tree has emerald ash borer. You are going to get a letter from the city telling you, when we are sure, that it is infested. And under our nuisance ordinance, any tree that has an infestation that makes it detrimental to a neighbor's tree, or it could become dangerous, or it's detrimental to your property, that kind of thing, can be ordered by the city to be removed. And we will send you a letter and tell you that. Now you will have a couple of choices depending on how much the canopy is gone. If the canopy is less than 30% or less and you wish to treat your tree, you will be able to let us know that you're going to treat your private tree. You know, that you have hired an arborist and are taking care of that situation. But once that tree gets past that 30% canopy loss, regardless of whether you've been treating it the whole time or not, at that point in time it becomes detrimental and dangerous, and we will order it to be removed. And you will be given a certain amount of time to remove that tree from your property. So it would be good if you knew which trees, if you have ash on your property, so that you could start to think about it now. If you really want to keep them and they're in good condition, treat them. You know, it's easier for you to treat one tree than for us to treat 360 trees. So, I mean, you have to make that decision, or know that we'll be ordering it to be removed. We do have 2 consulting arborists. That is a service that we provide. You do not have to pay our arborist to consult with you. If you call City Hall and ask for an arborist, we will make an appointment for you to meet with them. They will go through the trees on your property. They will tell you all about all the condition of all the trees on your property, but they will also identify the ash trees. If you've got your own tree company, or somebody who's telling you you've got EAB, or telling you that you need to do something, whether it's the wilts or whatever it is, you know, Dutch elm disease, please feel free to get a second opinion for free from one of the city arborists. We would love to have you call and we would send them out, and that way you just have 2 different people who are certified arborists giving you their opinion of what's going on and advising you. So, but we just didn't want it to be a shock. If you get emerald ash borer, it is going to happen. And if you're not treating, and it is dangerous eventually. We saw on the 2 trees that we're removing, from last year to this year, all of a sudden huge branches falling off, and if that happens and you're in your backyard, you could get injured, it could injure your house, it could fall into someone else's yard. I mean, that's the whole point of it. And it's not fair for your tree that's infested to infest another tree. The faster we react to it, the more we can slow it down. But the truth is, at least through all the training I've been through in 2 years, the fact is we're going to lose our ashes. And so we need to be prepared for that, and we need to think about what we're going to do instead of those ash trees, unless you're prepared to treat them forever.